Hello folks, how you guys doing? My name's Mark, this is Why I Hate the World. So this is what we're working on, our big deranged tentacle beast. Gonna add a little bit of color to it. So want to talk a little bit about the Palestinian encampment protests and the backlash against them. I made a video about 3 weeks ago talking about why leftists in general don't really accomplish anything because they don't vote. And I had some criticism in that video about direct actions and protests. If you are of the mindset that voting doesn't accomplish anything and that you would rather affect change through direct actions, that being protesting, boycotts, stuff like that, this is a lesson as to what happens when you rely on that in order to affect political change. When I say political change, I mean change in policy from the government of your country. You can't affect change in other ways, from a cultural perspective. People enacting things on their own without a government dictating or mandating or passing a law, stuff like that. That's definitely a way that you can affect change. And protests and stuff like that actually do a little bit to encourage that kind of change. The thing that protests actually do is they spread awareness of your issue. And it doesn't matter what that issue is, whether it's stopping the genocide in Palestine, whether it's water rights, if you're like a water defender trying to stop oil pipelines and stuff, whether you're protesting to stop global climate change, whatever. That's what your protest actually does. It does very good as far as getting the agenda on the table, getting people talking about it, spreading awareness of the issue, that sort of thing. Doesn't do very good as far as getting actual policy changes by a government, for example, to getting a law passed in order to get a policy change in your country. For example, stopping shipments of bullets and bombs to go kill civilians. If your goal is to actually stop that and to stop people from dying, and your government is supplying the ammunition that is killing these people, then going and camping out on the grass outside of a college is not the way to go about it. You're not going to accomplish anything. That was essentially my criticism of these pro-Palestinian encampments. It's like, well, they're not going to accomplish much. And what's going to happen is that there's going to be the inevitable crackdown, which will do a lot to injure the people who are there. The authorities, when they crack down on leftist protesters, tend to be brutal. And that's just been a law of the universe when it comes to these types of things, in the United States at least, for the past 70 years. Ever since we've had a leftist movement in this country for anything, the cops always tend to be really brutal when it comes to cracking down on protests from the left side of the aisle. Not so much when it comes to cracking down on right-wing protests, you notice. Right-wingers are allowed to get away with everything. They really only crack down on right-wingers when it gets really violent. When it goes too far, then they end up shooting and killing a few of them, and then the right-wing protest stops. Left-wing protests, no. They immediately come down with fire hoses and attack dogs and tear gas and rubber bullets and all of this shit. And that's what we see all the time. Every time there's a protest ever run by leftists, ever. Whether you're protesting a pipeline, they come in with bulldozers and attack dogs, stuff like that. If they just send in the fucking riot cops. The George Floyd protests. During those protests, they were just kidnapping people straight off of the street. During the Trump years, they were just basically picking people up, kidnapping them, not reading them their rights. Sometimes the cops wouldn't even wear badges. They would just grab people off the street, bring them who knows where, completely violating all of their rights. Because when it comes down to it, your rights really don't matter. When you're out there protesting and the riot police are coming and they're trapping you in, and your rights don't fucking matter in that case. The cops are going to beat the shit out of you. They're going to shoot you with rubber bullets and sandbags. And they're going to pop tires of cars and blame it on you. They're going to smash windows and they're going to blame it on you. And the cops are going to get away with it. The state wants to blame it all on the protesters, blame all the violence on the protesters. And if there is no violence, they'll just invent violence so that they can crack down even harder. And you end up, ultimately, your movement will not get what it wants. And that's what happened during Occupy Wall Street. That's what happened during the turn of the 21st century, the protests against the NWO and stuff like that, and the World Bank, that kind of thing. All of those protests just got cracked down. Those are all gone. That's what's going to happen this time too. And we're already seeing it because the state doesn't give a fuck when you protest. If you don't vote, if you don't turn your protest movement into a political one, then the state doesn't care. You'll never accomplish your goal. So we're seeing that starting to happen now with the pro-Palestinian encampment protests. We're starting to see some backlash. One thing I wanted to point out was a news article I saw about how in North Carolina, they've proposed a bill that would make it illegal to wear a mask. Completely illegal, so in public, for any reason, you're not allowed to wear a mask. This is designed to stifle protests, the Palestinian protests. That's what this is all about. Lots of states actually have these types of anti-mask laws, and they have been enabled for different reasons all throughout the years. There's one in Ohio, for example, that was enabled back in the 1960s, and it had to do with cracking down on the Ku Klux Klan. And you go, okay, well, that's a good thing, right? You know, they're using the state power to get rid of fascists and racists. But if you actually look at the history of it, it wasn't to crack down on racism. It was to crack down on the Klan specifically because the conservatives who wanted to defend segregation, they were trying to frame segregation as part of the modern South. And they saw the violent tactics of the Ku Klux Klan as standing in the way of that. So they wanted to get rid of the Ku Klux Klan so that people wouldn't identify them with violent extremists and racists, so that they can preserve segregation under the guise of it being moderate. The motives are never pure when it comes to restricting your rights. Even something like this. So that's what this bill is for in North Carolina. It's specifically to crack down on these protests at college campuses. Now, this bill, as originally written, would also have the side effect of preventing people from masking for medical reasons. Because if you have COVID, fuck you, is what they're trying to say. I mean, and the thing is, it makes perfect sense because Republicans don't give a shit about public health. They don't care if you're spreading an easily preventable disease. They don't give a fuck about that at all. When it comes to Republican, if you get sick, the only thing that you can do is just die, because they don't give a shit about people who are sick. They don't care about helping people who are sick or anything like that. And Republicans won't take the smallest, easiest way of preventing a disease. They won't do it if it causes them even the slightest bit of inconvenience. And that's what we've seen when it comes to masking in public. So that's how it was presented in the North Carolina State Senate, the original bill. In the North Carolina State House, some people who are actually not insane have put the provision back in to allow medical masking. Who knows if it'll actually pass? I would like to point you to a tweet from somebody named Erin Pear. I think her name is Erin Pear. She is a Republican in the North Carolina State House. I will not vote to concur with the Senate changes to House Bill 237. That's the bill we're talking about. Every person has the freedom to wear a mask to ensure their physical health and safety if they want to. Removing the medical mask exemption provision from current state law has created confusion among the public. HB 237 also enhances penalties for people who use a mask to conceal their identity while committing a crime, which is good and important. The right thing to do here is to add back the deleted provisions regarding medical masking and give the public clarity on the issue. Now, this sounds like it's sane, but I would just like to point out to you how easy it is to make you accept a certain provision by making it sound sane like this. Now, what exactly is this law about? This law is about removing the ability for anyone to wear a mask in public for any reason. That's what this law is about. This person is saying that we should allow people to wear masks for medical reasons. It has now shifted the discussion away from the fact that you're not allowed to wear a mask to now you can wear a mask for medical reasons, but you're not allowed to wear it for any other reasons. By softening the stance like this, it allows them to still pass their draconian law. The right thing to do here is not to add back the deleted provisions. The right thing to do is to vote against the law, because you should have a right to protest. And you should have a right to protect your identity while you protest. What this is really all about is that they don't want people who are protesting at these encampment protests at colleges and stuff. They don't want them to be able to hide their identity because they want to retaliate against them. That's what this is really about. And by trying to frame the argument as, oh, it's medical masking, it softens it so that the general public will accept this draconian measure. Something like this wouldn't have been a concern 40, maybe even 30 years ago, maybe even in the 90s, right? Because back then, everyone in the world didn't have a fucking camera on them 24/7 at all times. So you could go to a protest, you could show your face, and chances are nobody would be sitting there trying to figure out who you are. Now you can't do that anymore. So now if you go to a protest for any reason, and I'm going to say this even if you're a left-wing protester, a right-wing protester, whatever your cause is, whatever you're protesting, if you decide to go out and protest somewhere, it is in your best interest to hide your identity, because there will be somebody who will try to retaliate against you, and they have the technology now to do it. First off, people put everything about them in the world on social media, so it's not even really that hard to figure out who somebody is. You can just go to, let's say you're at a university, you post a picture of yourself, you could just go to the university website and look at a bunch of pictures and probably find out who that person is that way. Then you can track them down. You can go to their Facebook, you can go to their Twitter, you can go to their Instagram, and you can find out everything about them, where they live, all the stuff like that. It's all you really need to find out everything there is about somebody is their first name and a phone number. And you can find out pretty much everything you need to know. You can find out their email address, you can find out their physical home address, you can find out their last name very easily. And then if they have a social media about themselves, you can find out all kinds of shit, like where they work, what their political affiliation is, what their religion is, who their relatives are, all of that shit, because people provide that information about themselves just free of charge. This is why I don't do that. If you go on any of my social media, there's no mention of my last name. There's no mention of where I work. There's no mention of where I live. But you'll still be able to figure it out if you try hard enough. You'll be able to figure out what my last name is, who my relatives are. And from that, you could probably figure out where I work and where I live and shit like that. That's just the age that we live in. But, my advice to people is don't make it easy for people. So that's the first thing. Second thing, even if you don't have all that, even if you just have a photo, you can use facial recognition technology and you can probably find out who that person is. It's really not that hard for somebody with the resources to do that, like say a police organization or a rich corporation or something like that. Even a private detective can find out all of this stuff just by getting a photo of you. Chances are they'll be able to find it. It depends on how big your online imprint is, how much you use social media, stuff like that, and if you actually happen to have a criminal record and that kind of thing. But chances are they can find out who you are. I mean, most people out there now have an internet footprint of some kind. Most people who are in a Western country who go to college have some form of social media. They have some form of digital footprint. Somewhere they have records out there that can be tracked down. And so you should be able to protest and not have to worry about this stuff. And this is exactly what's going on out here, is that these kids are getting doxxed like crazy. They're getting death threats. That we shouldn't allow this kind of thing to happen it really does a lot to chill political discourse in this country, right? If you were wondering, this bill is currently in committee. It passed the House, or it passed the Senate, excuse me, in the North Carolina Senate. All of the Republicans voted for it. All of the Democrats voted against it. No surprise there. Seems like every time there's something that takes away people's rights or makes it harder to be politically active in the country, the Republicans are always all for it. Here's the thing about this, right? Let's say that you were at a protest like this. You're not allowed to wear masks. And then the cops decide, okay, we're going to retaliate against these protesters. Can they arrest everybody? No. Let's say you're at a protest with 5,000 people. Can the police department arrest all 5,000 of those people? No. At least not right away. What can they do? They can go through the videos, they can go through the photos, they can find people who actually do break laws. Or let's say you actually do something illegal. Let's say you vandalize something. Let's say you break a window, or you tear down a sign, or you tear down a statue. There you go. Like say there's a Confederate statue and you tear it down. Something like that. They can go through the videos on social media of this event. They can investigate using facial recognition technology, find out who you are, and charge you for that crime. Sometimes this is a good thing. This same technology is being used to catch the insurrectionists from the January 6th insurrection, where they tried to take over the fucking country and do a coup d'etat and install Donald Trump as a dictator. So it's can be used for good and evil. But should you be arrested for stuff like this at a protest? I don't think so. I think you should have the ability to fight back against this kind of thing. And you should legally be allowed to wear a mask and protect your identity, because fuck the police. That's what I think. So yeah, they can't arrest everyone, but they can go through afterwards and arrest people. They can arrest enough people to where it has a chilling effect, so that maybe next time people don't want to go to the protest. Maybe next time they see, oh, well, everybody got busted who went to the last one, and they're spending all this time going through the legal system. Maybe I won't show up at the next one. I don't want that happening to me. You know, even if you just go and even if you get a slap on the wrist, it's still a giant pain in the ass. And there's no guarantee that you will get a slap on the wrist. I mean, so most people who get busted for protesting, that's what it is. They'll get like something really small. You know, they'll have to go pick up trash or something like that. They'll get community service. 99% of the time, the charges just get dropped. But there's no guarantee that that's what'll happen. What if they decide to throw the book at you? There's other laws being passed here, like the Supreme Court, for example. The Supreme Court just ruled that if you are at a protest and you organize the protest, and there's any act of violence at all at the protest, any act of violence at all, that then now you can be sued. You're now liable for that act of violence. So let's say that you run a protest, and it doesn't even have to be someone who's there protesting on your side. It could be a counter protester. So let's say that you're organize a protest, a Free Palestine protest, and a bunch of asshole like counter protesters show up and start smashing things. You as the organizer of that protest can now be sued for the damages they caused. That's what the Supreme Court just ruled in favor of. They said that's legal, that's A-okay. Now, that's only the law in like 2 states. I think Texas and like Tennessee, of course. Of course it would be the Deep South, right? But that kind of goes to show, like, this is how far they'll go. This is what they'll do in order to stop you from protesting, in order to stop those direct actions. Which, of course, means that you should just do it even more. But who's going to go out and risk their freedom for this? And not just their freedom, but their financial freedom. Would you organize a protest if you knew that you could be held liable and potentially be sued for thousands, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars if, say, the Proud Boys showed up and started a fight? Would you do it? Would you protest? Now, I mean, I wouldn't blame anybody for not doing that. I would not blame anybody for just not deciding to go to the protest, to just not organize a protest at all. Of course, the way you get around that is that you organize it online anonymously and you say, I didn't organize this shit. That's how you get around that. But still, the point stands. This is what they're doing to people out there. When it comes to these anti-mask laws that they're starting to pass now, right? A lot of these got passed in the past. Like I said, the one in Ohio was to fight against the KKK. A lot of these were passed actually after the Occupy Wall Street movement, and they're just sort of digging them up here. For example, there was one in Ohio. The one in Ohio is 70 years old and is usually not used. It's sort of archaic, and it's one of those laws that they only pull up like when they want to add shit to your charges to make it, like sometimes like a prosecutor, you know, like if you get busted with something, they'll charge you with 17 different bullshit charges in order to get you to flip or like take a plea bargain or whatever, and it makes it sound worse than it actually is. That's what this anti-mask thing in Ohio is, like this fucking ridiculous bullshit 70-year-old archaic law that no one ever fucking uses and no one is ever charged with. They're digging shit up like that in order to stop these protests. In fact, there was an article I read that mentioned the Attorney General. One of the Attorney Generals in Ohio, his name is Dave Yost. He sent a letter to the state's 14 public universities where these pro-Palestinian protests were happening and alerted them that the protesters could be charged with a felony under this 70-year-old anti-mask law. This same threat has been made in several different states, Florida, North Carolina. In Texas, the governor, Greg Abbott, who's a piece of work, we should do a video on this guy one of these days, he partially justified his violent breakup of the Palestinian protests there, citing Texas's obscure mask ban. Same fucking thing. They're basically using it as an excuse in order to crack down on protests. These same types of laws also exist in a lot of states: Connecticut, California, Massachusetts, Michigan, New Mexico, North Carolina, North Dakota, stuff like that. And they only pull them up when they deal with specifically left-wing protesters. Because that's the thing, they're just going to outlaw your protests. Say, if you rely on protesting in order to affect change, then they're just going to outlaw your protests. And banning masking is one of the methods by which they do it. Now, like I said, there's a good reason for you to wear a mask like this, you know, protecting yourself from the possible prosecution for crimes real and imagined, you know? I mean, I'm not just saying crimes you might have actually committed, but you may be charged with bullshit crimes that have no basis in fucking reality, that you may even beat, but only after spending years of your life and thousands of dollars going through a very expensive court system. Who wants to go through that aggravation? But it's not just that, it's also doxing, which is a very big problem out there, and it's one of the weapons that the right wing uses to fight back against protesters. So, for example, Columbia University, right when all this whole thing started, right when they first started their pro-Palestinian encampment, there was a huge box truck driving around, and it had these giant LED TV screens on the truck, driving around doxing students who were part of the protest, giving their photos and their names. You know, that's illegal. You're not allowed to dox people. You're not allowed to just go around and give out people's names and addresses and private information. There are laws in every state, including New York, to stop that. Have there been any arrests? Like, have the people who drove around with that truck doxing students, did they get arrested? Nope. Is there even an investigation into who rented that truck out, who was driving it, and who provided that information? Probably not. There probably was one and it didn't go anywhere, and it was just whatever, and the cops just gave up on it because fuck it, who cares? That's probably what fucking happened. You know, when you dox someone, it's not always on some obscure website somewhere so that a bunch of online trolls can come and make fun of you or something like that. It's a weapon. It's a weapon that these guys blatantly use in defiance of the law, because it is illegal to dox people. And they don't give a fuck because they know nothing's going to happen to them. because nothing ever happens to the right wing in this country when they abuse the law like this. So this is not the only place where it's happened, of course. Protesters at the New York Stern School of Business, the City College of New York, the University of Texas, and a couple of others, they've all been doxxed. They've all gotten away with it. And it's not just that. It's not just the doxing, but the actual violent counter-protesters who go around and enact violence on the protesters. You want to defend your identity because there's a real danger that these people may come after you. Another thing that happened April 30th of this year at UCLA here in Los Angeles, at the middle of the night in April 30th, a large number of counter-protesters show up. These are pro-Israel protesters. Came and essentially raided the encampment, started beating people with clubs and sticks and poles, throwing fireworks into the encampment, breaking down barriers. In the middle of the night, these people show up, start busting heads. And the thing is, these people weren't cops. They weren't police, right? This is the kind of thing you usually see from like the right wing, Proud Boy types. But these were pro-Israeli protesters. And some people are saying that they actually were Proud Boy types. And this is like one of those rare instances where you get groups like the Proud Boys, who are usually anti-Semitic, kind of joining forces with people who are like pro-Israel. When it comes to Israel and Palestine and like support for Israel, there's a strange bedfellows. People who are usually anti-Semitic, like extreme right-wing Christians, will join forces with Zionists. Mainly because they need Israel to be around for there to be their version of the end times. Israel has to exist so that Jesus can come back and kill them all. That's essentially why they're pro-Israeli. But anyway, that happened, regardless, right? That's kind of a tangent. That happened April 30th of this year. A bunch of counter-protesters show up in the middle of the night, start beating the shit out of the pro-Palestinian protesters in the encampment, destroying the encampment, while the police just sat there and did nothing. The police just did absolutely fucking nothing, just watched it happen. Then, of course, the next day, campus authorities said, hey, this encampment is too dangerous. People are being hurt. And then they went in and forcibly broke it up. Yeah, it's too dangerous because you assholes weren't defending the victims in this situation. Did anybody do anything about that? Was there any sort of investigation into finding out who these assholes were? These guys who went and blatantly broke the law and beat people up and threw fireworks at people and terrorized people in the middle of the fucking night? There was one arrest yesterday. So roughly a month later, finally they arrest somebody. This should happen on April 30th. So it's like, okay, I guess they arrested one guy that they had video of. They arrested an 18-year-old kid who got caught beating somebody with a wooden pole. This 18-year-old kid, his name is Eden On, and apparently, when he grows up, he wants to join the Israeli Defense Forces. That's an actual thing. I'm not making that up. I'm not bad-mouthing him. That's actually from his social media. He wants to go join the IDF and kill Palestinians. That's his thing. That just kind of goes to show you, man, what have we learned from this experience? Because these protests have been going on for a little while now. What's actually happened? Nothing. Has the genocide in Gaza slowed? No, it's as bad as it's ever been. There's been some movement from the Biden administration in order to limit the types of weapons that they're giving them. But Biden still, even though he did this one little limitation on them, he still hasn't gone all the way. He still hasn't said, stop this, or we're taking away all the support. You notice that? So even this, though, do you think that Joe Biden would have even done this little tiny sliver of a restriction on them if he thought that it wouldn't benefit him politically? That's just something to keep that in mind. It's like even the smallest little basic fucking thing is a political calculation here. Why is Biden doing that? Because he's seeing that his numbers are slipping in the polls. He wants your votes. He realizes that if there's a massacre of 200,000 civilians, then he's going to lose the election. And yeah, it's shitty, it's cynical, it's wrong, but what do you want? Do you want there to not be a massacre? Then this is what you need to capitalize on. If we turn this movement into a political one, if we turn it around and say, hey, Joe Biden, if you stop this, then we'll vote for you. Then you'll start to see some movement. You'll start to see more than just them building a pier and dropping parachutes. Right? That don't do anything, that barely do anything to save anybody. You know, we'll see them do more than, because this is what Joe Biden said. Oh, we'll still give you rockets and bombs, just not the ones that you can use to kill civilians with. It's like, well, what about the ones you're giving them? Can't they use those to kill civilians with too? He's trying to basically play it both ways. And if we were to turn this movement into a political movement and say, hey, you can't do it both ways, you want our votes, stop this genocide, we would probably see some more movements towards limiting the support of Israel there. That's what we would do, right? But we're not doing that, right? The movement is not doing that. They're not going that way. These people have basically said, hey, we're not voting for anyone regardless. Even if you stop the genocide, we're not voting for you. So why would Joe Biden stop supporting Israel if he knows he's not going to get any benefit from it? Why would he do it? Why? So that he can lose votes from people who aren't going to vote for him anyway? Like, no. See, he's calculated, the Biden team, they've calculated that this is all they need in order to hang on to the majority of Democratic votes. That's what they've said there. They said, okay, we can, you know, people like Israel. We need to still support Israel, but they don't like war and they don't like the genocide in Gaza. So how can we skirt that line? And this is how they've calculated, oh, well, we can skirt it by saying, oh, well, we won't give you bombs and weapons and bullets that you can use to invade Rafah. We all know that's bullshit, but this is what they figure because they know that the kids that are out there in these encampments aren't going to vote for him anyway. So he doesn't have to worry about losing your votes. You see how this works, folks? So if you want shit to get done, you have to make them afraid of losing your vote. You have to make them think that, hey, we're going to lose the election unless this constituency votes for us. Well, if you never vote for him in the fucking first place, if you make it clear that no matter what he does, you're not going to come out there and support him, then he's not going to go out there and do what you want. And that's how politics works. That's how politics works. Because we've already seen here that the protest isn't going to do anything. The protest has not stopped the genocide. It's not stopped it at all. As each day goes on, they're making it harder and harder to do these direct actions anyway. And now you're taking your life and your future into your hands when you go out and you do these direct actions. And it's like, is it even worth it? You know, here's the other thing you guys aren't thinking about, right? Right-wing groups out there, the ones who are doing all of these doxing, you know, they're not going to just stop once the protest is over. If your name and your face get out there, that also damages your future employment prospects as well. And yeah, you know something, when you're 19, 20, 21 and you're in college, you may say to yourself, well, I don't give a shit about that anyway. I'm not going to work for any corporation out there that supports XYZ or who would even do that. You may say that now. When you're 35 and you need a job, you may not be saying that same thing. Just something to think about. And I'm not saying that as you grow older, you sell out or whatever. No, I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is that if your name and your face are out there and it's assorted with radical politics, then that comes up in a background check when you go and get hired for a job. Pretty much every job worth anything does a background check nowadays anyway. They want to make sure you're not a criminal. You know, they're looking to make sure you're not a white supremacist. They're looking to make sure that you're not a fucking insane revolutionary who's going to, fuck their shit up. Right? I guess, in long story short. They're looking to make sure that, you're not crazy and that you're a low risk. And you may not care about that when you're 21. But when you're 31, when you're 41, and you suddenly don't get a job that you're 100% qualified for because some right-wing assholes 10 years ago put your name and your face on a website. These are the ramifications. These are the things that you got to think about. So it's not just the cops that you have to worry about here. Who wants to take that risk? What's your alternative to this? Voting. That's your alternative. If you're totally cool with that, I'm not saying that you shouldn't engage in direct actions. You should. You should protest because it's your right to protest in this country. And if you don't do it, then the fucking Nazis win. So go out there and protest. But I'm also saying that you should vote. You should do both. You should vote your conscience, vote for who you want to vote for. It doesn't have to be Joe Biden. You know, there's other candidates. There's Cornel West. Vote for Cornel West. Vote for Jill Stein. I mean, I'll never fucking vote for Jill Stein because she's a joke, but she aligns with what you align with politically. Vote for her. Fuck, vote for, I don't know, RFK if that's what you're into. Vote. I mean, please don't vote for Donald Trump. I hope you don't. I hope you're safe. I hope all the people who are watching my videos are like never gonna vote for Republicans. But that's what I'm saying, folks. It's like, because the protests, this is what's happening out there. You know, you're taking your life, your future, your reputation into your hands at these protests. And they don't accomplish the shit that you want to accomplish. Be effective. I mean, aren't you guys tired of shit never changing? I don't know about you, but I am. I'm tired of every single day, things going by, nothing ever getting better in this country. The same just shitty economy, the same asshole fucking racists running everything, scumbag racists taking advantage of everyone, spreading hate and bigotry. I'm tired of the same fucking soulless assholes just exploiting people left and right. Because it just never changes. It's just the same shit over and over and over. I'm tired of there just never being any progress. And the reason why there's no progress is because the people who need to make the progress aren't putting in the work to do that. Part of that work is being active politically. It means supporting causes with your money and your time in order to affect change. And part of that is using the ballot box. It's not the 100% complete solution, but it is a major component of that solution. And if you ignore that piece, then in my opinion, you're just part of the problem.
Hello folks, if you like what I do and you want to support the channel, please consider buying something from my Etsy shop, supporting me on Patreon, liking and subscribing, and checking me out across my social media links listed below. Thank you all so much, and see you next time.